Carolyn B. Glick is by far the Jerusalem Post's most popular columnist. She's just published a book, The Israel Solution, which I haven't read, I confess. I started reading it, but it's supposed to be thought-provoking and challenging conventional wisdom and providing an alternative to the two-state solution. She, of course, will describe this more in detail, but I don't want to waste any time because I want to give her the floor. It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce my esteemed colleague, Carolyn Glick.
Hi, so great to be back here for year 3, huh? Thank you for all the repeat attendees, and thank you for all the new ones. Thank you all very much for coming and supporting the Jerusalem Post, the most important Israeli newspaper. This is what my book looks like, The Israeli Solution, a one-state plan for peace in the Middle East. And Steve, I promise I'll give you a copy, okay? But then you have to write a book report. So again, thank you, and I'm sorry for rushing all of you in from lunch, but there you have it. So yes, my book says it's time to move on from the two-state solution, and I thought I'd just share some of the thoughts that I bring to bear in it with you today. And it's really fortuitous, I think, that my book came out just as the two-state solution completely disintegrated. So I don't think Random House didn't do it on purpose, but then, you know, I personally view it as a miracle. And so thank you, God. Anyway. And just to show, you know, what we're doing in terms of beating a poor dead horse who's actually been dead for 90 years, and we just keep hitting it more and more. This morning I read in the Jerusalem Post that Justice Minister Livni said that Mahmoud Abbas has to prove that he's a peace partner. Yeah, that would be interesting, him proving that he's a peace partner just as he's proving that he's not a peace partner. And then she said, and then she made this very interesting statement about the concept of Israel actually allowing Jews to have and implement their property rights in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem at any time, and particularly now that it's clear that the whole two-state solution thing was an utter and complete failure. And so she made this statement she wrote on her Facebook page. She wrote, "While we may have criticism of Palestinians, we need to understand that even when we're right and take the right decisions, construction in the settlement renders us the guilty party. It is permissible to get angry over this, but it is also possible and even preferable to understand and act accordingly." In other words, what she's saying is that even though we have the right to do something, and even though we don't have a peace partner, and even though it's perfectly legal and all the rest of it, we just have to accept that we're guilty if we ever assert our rights to our land. And therefore, we should just not do it. The better part of wisdom is just bending over backwards for people who made it absolutely clear just this last week that they have no intention of ever making peace with us or recognizing our right to exist. So that's quite amazing. And that's on the Israeli side. And then we had the Israeli left's favorite American journalist, who is Tom Friedman, writing in the New York Times, this weekend, that supporters of Israel's sovereign rights to Judea and Samaria are the moral equivalents of the Iranian mullahs who want to annihilate the Jewish people. That's nice to know. Just call me what, Carolyn Khamenei? Gee whiz. See, this is what happens. This is actually, I think, not at all surprising, because the end state that we're inevitably led to when we continue on this two-state delusion is we end up with Israeli leaders saying that Israel has no right to defend itself, and we end up with outsiders saying that we're evil if we defend ourselves. In both cases, they don't say it exactly like that, although Tom Friedman basically said it like that. But they also, they broach the subject in terms of statistics. And they tell us that if we assert our rights to Judea and Samaria, then we're going to cease to be a democracy, or we'll cease to be a Jewish state. And the only way that we can move forward as Jews in the land of Israel with any sovereign rights whatsoever is by giving up Judea and Samaria and dividing Jerusalem, because otherwise we're going to be overrun tomorrow by Palestinians in the Palestinian womb. Friedman used the number 2.7 million Palestinians, which is interesting. I just sort of wonder where he found them, because in Judea and Samaria today there are between 1.5 and 1.6 million Palestinians, depending on who you're looking at, and that means that today Jews make up between 62 and 66% of the population in the landmass west of the Jordan River, not including Gaza, which of course we shouldn't include because we renounced sovereign rights to it in 2005 when we left lock, stock, and barrel. And I don't think that anybody can seriously claim that we're still in charge there. And not only do we make up between 62 and 66%, but all of the trends are trending in Israel's direction. So today, Israeli Jewish birth rates are higher than Palestinian Arab birth rates in Judea and Samaria. It's 3.04 children per Israeli Jewish woman and 2.91 children per Palestinian woman in Judea and Samaria. That's right, I'm an Israeli mom. Come on, yeah, give us hands. That's right. That's right. Jewish mothers unite. But we also have high and rising aliyah rates to Israel. Last year we had 19,000 new olim come to Israel. And what's amazing about the aliyah rates is that we're actually seeing a mass increase, or that we are on a precipice of a mass increase. So let me just explain. For instance, French aliyah. French aliyah last year increased 69% in 2013 over 2012. Overall, since 2008, aliyah of French Jewry has increased 74%. Since 2008, Belgian Jewry, aliyah from Belgium has increased 110%. Aliyah from Switzerland has similarly increased by mass numbers. On the other hand, the Palestinians are hemorrhaging emigration. You have between 40 and 50,000 Palestinians leaving Judea and Samaria year in, year out. So that not only do we have a solid Jewish majority today, but the trends are all moving in Israel's favor. We have 130,000 Jews living in Ukraine. With the fascist apparently now empowered in Kiev, I would assume that, God willing, they're going to get up and go and come to Israel in large numbers. So we're looking at, again, a potential both in Western and in Eastern Europe of a massive wave of aliyah that has to be facilitated and cultivated by the Israeli government. And I would like to believe that we will be using our good offices to ensure that, that this potential is met and surpassed in the coming decade. And there's no reason to assume that it won't. Now, when we ask what the real demographic threat to Israel is, that real demographic threat is actually a Palestinian state. You know, this is a dirty little secret nobody ever mentions when they talk about making the Palestinians abrogate a so-called right of return of millions of foreign Arabs to a truncated Jewish state, which is that, say that they abrogate that right. Say that Mahmoud Abbas tomorrow says, okay, we agree that nobody will move to Tzfat, although he never would say that. But assume for a second that we signed a deal that prevented or that blocked mass Arab immigration to an indefensible Jewish state. Well, that wouldn't block these people from entering into a state of Palestine. So what we would actually have is a Jewish state with indefensible borders, with frontiers as small as 10 miles across or 9 miles across from from east to west that nobody, I mean, even General Patton couldn't defend. And we would have Jerusalem as a partitioned city, so you could just easily walk through the Damascus Gate, walk out the Jaffa Gate, walk over to Rechavia, no problem. Be a divided city. And you're talking about millions of people coming into Jenin and Ramallah from places like the Al-Bureid refugee camp in Lebanon that's controlled by Al-Qaeda, from refugee camps so-called run by the UN and controlled by Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas, Ahmed Jibril. And they would be coming into the state of Palestine, abutting an indefensible Jewish state. Would they all just be looking for jobs and wanting to give their kids a better future? Don't bet on it. In fact, you should bet that that is not what the case would be. This would not be a peaceful border. This would not be a peaceful population. These are people who have been marinated in genocidal Jew hatred for the past 65 years. That is the existential demographic threat to Israel. And that is a threat that Israel has no answer to. So that actually, if this two-state fantasy ever led to the establishment of a Palestinian state in the borders that everybody who's everybody knows would be the borders of a Palestinian state, that would manifest an existential demographic threat to Israel, not if Israel were to apply its sovereignty to Judea and Samaria tomorrow. That is what would prevent demography from becoming an existential threat to Israel. So this is a sympathetic crowd, and I dare say that there are a lot of people here who oppose a two-state solution. The other alternative that's been bandied about is to just keep things as it is, keep things as they are, just maintain the status quo where we have the PLO governing the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. So what's the problem with the status quo? Well, ask the brave students in places like SUNY Binghamton who were talking about the BDS movement this morning. Thank you so much for everything that you do to defend Israel on U.S. college campuses. Thank you so much. You are the front line of the fight for the legitimacy for the Jewish people. Don't forget that we need you. Thank you. You see, the foreign minister is correct. The BDS movement doesn't impact Israel's economic prosperity. The same countries where you have mass BDS movements are also expanding their trade with Israel year in, year out by 5 to 10 percentage points. They need Israel's economic engines for their pharmaceutical industries, for their high tech, for any knowledge-based industries they may have, for their agro-tech, and so on and so forth. BDS isn't not about specifically economic warfare against Israel, although it uses economic warfare. It's about delegitimizing Israel. It's about making it impossible for people to freely express their support for the Jewish state. It's about empowering anti-Semites and anti-Semitism and making it socially acceptable to hate Jews again. And that is why it is such a profound threat to Israel. That is why it is such a profound threat to Jews all over the world. Now, what's the problem with the two-state solution in relationship to the BDS movement? Well, the two-state solution is predicated on an assumption of Israeli culpability for the absence of peace in the Middle East. Because the two-state solution is based upon a claim that the reason why there is instability, violence, and other political pathologies emanating from the Islamic world is the absence of a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River. And the party that is assigned the blame for the absence of that state is Israel. That is, the two-state solution blames the Jews for the absence of peace in the Middle East. And when Israel accepts that as its paradigm for policymaking, it is incapable of defending itself. Because again, if the blame for the absence of peace in the Middle East is placed on the shoulders of the only party that has consistently sought peace since the dawn of modern Zionism, then that party simply cannot defend its rights, it cannot defend its actions, it cannot defend any of the decisions made by its government on a daily basis, because we're at fault. That's the allure of the two-state solution, of course, because if Israel is at fault, then we can also solve everything, right? All we have to do is leave territory. All we have to do is make sure that people with views like Glick's, are given as small audiences as possible because, gosh, they're dangerous views saying that Jews have rights. We cannot defend ourselves when we are putting forward the two-state solution. We cannot say, look, this is why we're doing things if we accept that we're occupiers. Because it doesn't matter if you need defensible borders. It doesn't matter that you're a liberal democracy. It doesn't matter that women in Israel are the only women in the Middle East that have full and equal rights. It doesn't matter that you have freedom religion in Israel if you're occupying somebody else's land. And if that's the cause of the problems of the world emanating from the Middle East, then nobody cares about anything. If we're not right, if we are not exercising our rights, then we're in the wrong. Again, if we're occupying somebody else's land, if Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem belong to the PLO, then what does it matter if we don't have defensible borders without them? Bill Clinton said in 2010, he said that once a Palestinian state is established, or if a Palestinian state is established, half of the terrorism, not just in the region, but in the world, will disappear. No single act will have a more profound impact on global terrorism than the establishment of a Palestinian state. This is what Bill Clinton said in 2010. Do you think his wife disagrees with him? No, and neither does John Kerry. That's why he's been to Israel 12 times in the past 12 months while the entire region is falling apart. That's what President Obama thinks. That's what Condoleezza Rice thought. That's what President Bush thought. Everybody thinks this. And it is a crazy concept that again says that Israel has no right to defend itself, because if we defend ourselves, then we prolong not the Palestinian conflict with Israel, but all of the problems emanating from the region. It's our fault. And that's why the situation on campuses has become so poisonous. Because the people who are trying to defend Israel are talking a completely different language than the people who are attacking it. We're talking about what a liberal democracy we are. We're talking about the fact that we're the engine of innovation in the global economy, all true and completely irrelevant from the perspective of the people who are attacking Israel and claiming that we're the root of all evil in the world, not because we don't respect the rights of women so much, but because by not quitting these areas, we are the principal engine of everything bad. That is what it means to embrace a paradigm that is at its root anti-Jewish. Now, that's on college campuses. The same goes for these international organizations that everybody's so concerned about, the ICC, the UN, all of these other international forums. We're not asserting our rights. One party, the party that rejects peace, the party that rejects peaceful coexistence, the party that cultivates terrorism and murder, they're saying that they're on the side of justice. And we're saying we're pro-peace. But if justice lays with them, it doesn't lay with us. We thought at the outset that justice was divisible, that we could find justice in both sides. But the other side rejects the justice of our side and claims it all for itself. And we're not denying that, because by legitimizing them, we're agreeing with them. By not saying Abbas is cultivating terrorism and funding terrorism, enabling terrorism, and sponsoring terrorism, and he doesn't have to prove that he's a partner for peace. He has proved that he is not a partner for peace, and we therefore are not going to treat him as a partner for peace anymore. By not saying that, we're arguing on his behalf. We're saying, listen to this guy. He's legitimate. We're saying, yes, there's credence to his claim because we want to make a deal with him. Well, if you want to make a deal with him, then he can't be all bad. And his claims can't all be nonsense, because if they were, then why are you continuing to sit with him and claim that he's a moderate partner in peace? How do we defend ourselves then? That's the problem with the status quo from a diplomatic perspective. From a military perspective, because we share security control of Judea and Samaria with a hostile entity, and we legitimize this entity, despite the fact that they are not legitimate peace partners and they are not moderate, what do? We enable the formation of a U.S. trained and financed military run by them. You know, and the people who are involved from the U.S. side in building and maintaining this Palestinian military force, which is now, I think, up to 9 battalions. Lieutenant General Keith Dayton, he gave a speech at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy Research a few years ago. And in the Q&A, he was asked by Paul Wolfowitz whether he foresaw this Palestinian military force being used against Israel, and he said yes. He said if the Palestinians don't get what they want, then certainly they're going to be using other means to get it. And we know this from past experience. Since 1996, the front line of the Palestinian attacks against Israel has been the Palestinian security services. We know this. We've already been here. And what does the IDF think? Well, you know, they're enabling this, but on the other hand, Avi Mizrahi, when he was the commanding general of the Central Command, said that right now we're seeing a Palestinian military force being built by the Americans, unlike any Palestinian security force we've faced in the past. So we know we're going to have to face these people at some point, and by maintaining our support for the mendacious two-state plan, we're enabling this force to grow and get stronger, and again, be trained by the U.S. military. This is a major problem. And instead of saying this is a problem, we say, well, you know, yeah, they're collaborating with us against Hamas, and so we think that they're a really positive force in the region. No, they're not. They can't be. They cannot be. By design, they cannot be in the long term an ally of Israel because they are controlled by people who reject our right to exist. And they are cultivating that ideology in their ranks. So explain to me how this is a sustainable position. It is not a sustainable position. It is a dangerous position. So given the dangers of the two states, that it will constitute an existential threat to Israel, both from a demographic perspective and from a security perspective. Not to mention what it will do to Israeli society if you see 550,000 Jews expelled from their homes forcibly by the IDF. And when you look at the growing threat that maintaining this policy, even while recognizing its futility, manifests for Israel, our inability to coherently launch a defense of ourselves and our actions on the international stage because we are hamstrung, as Tzipi Livni made clear in her Facebook post this morning, by our continued allegiance to this failed policy, and are not able to defend ourselves without exposing the utter fraudulence of the two-state model. And we are cultivating the establishment and formation of a Palestinian military force by the U.S. military that will eventually be used against us. How do we cope? What are we supposed to do? Well, this is what I write about in my book. I present a plan which is certainly not without flaws and not without problems, but I believe that they're policy challenges as opposed to existential threats, where I say what we have to do is simply apply Israeli law to Judea and Samaria, just as we did in 1967 to unify Jerusalem, and just as we did in 1981 on the Golan Heights. That's what we have to do. And we have to tell the Palestinians who live in Judea and Samaria, 1.5 million of them, or 1.6 million, yes, you can have, just as the Jerusalem Arabs did, you can have the right to apply for Israeli citizenship, and you will have permanent residency status. Will everybody get citizenship? Will everybody apply for citizenship? I assume that the answer is no on both counts. And finally, just one last thing that I want to say, because I see with my peripheral vision that Steve is standing there wanting me to quit. But I'm not going to look at him directly because then I'll really have to shut up. Here, all I want to say about this is that what we have to recognize that it's a challenge, not an existential threat. And by that I mean we have to look at the situation as a dynamic situation. The Arab Spring has fundamentally changed the perspective of Israel's Arab population. Not just the Christians, who are now joining the military on a volunteer basis in numbers we've never seen before, but also among the Muslims of Israel. We have to embrace and cultivate this integrationalist pulse, both among the Israeli Arabs and among the Palestinians. Israel has so much to offer. And the Arab world surrounding us is making people lose their allegiances to long-held views and prejudices, and recognizing for the first time new opportunities because they need to in order to survive. And the main thing that the Israeli Arab society is looking at, and this is a significant incipient trend that we see more and more to the point where we can't ignore it anymore, is that Israel is the best thing they have in their lives, and they want to be a part of it. We need to encourage this. We need to cultivate this. And because I believe we can, I think that although the challenges that my plan presents, and I urge you to read the book, I am cautiously optimistic about Israel's prospects in the future. I'm optimistic, wildly optimistic about how things will end up in the long term. But I think that if we have the wisdom as a people, and I know we do, to move forward boldly and based upon who we are and what we stand for, we will place ourselves in a much better situation in the next 10 years than we have been in the last 20 years. And instead of going from weakness to weakness, we will, as Am Yisrael, go from strength to strength. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.